Well, speaking of writing, you went on and wrote in 1980 New Roots for Agriculture.
Right.
And I have not read every word in that, but I noticed that in your most recent book you also had a chapter called New Roots for Agriculture.
Right.
And you were taking on the till system, as I remember.
Right. Well,
you want to expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, in New Roots for Agriculture, the chapter 8 of the second edition is a paper that I wrote. I might have started it in 77. At any rate, it was published in 78 in Not Man Apart under the title Toward a Sustainable Agriculture. People have tried to credit me with being the first to use that term. I'm pretty sure it was in the culture and around before then. But anyway, it was in 78. And that was the consequence of the General Accounting Office had come out with a study about soil erosion. And it looked to me like it was extremely high. And thinking about the history of soil erosion from the time the Soil Conservation Service was founded under the energetic and imaginative Hugh Hammond Bennett, it seemed to me that we ought to be doing better. And so I got into the history, started looking at the history of those who had talked about soil erosion. And my golly, it went all the way back to Job.
Yes.
I mean, we're forever talking about, when Job talked about the waters wear away to the stones and take away the hope of man, and Plato had lamented the demise of the mountains of Attica that were once prosperous but now only fit for bees. And there are, you know, countless examples of people that have worried about this problem. So soil erosion is, as I see it, right at the core of what I came to call the problem of agriculture rather than problems in agriculture. Well, as an evolutionary biologist and thinking about the human, having been around with the big brain, the 1,350 cubic centimeter brain, we've been around anywhere 150 to 200,000 years, say. Well, that's only if you take 10,000 years of agriculture and put it over well, let's say 200,000 years, that's 5%. If it's over 100,000 years, that's 10% of our total history with the big brain. We've been into agriculture. So agriculture is a Johnny-come-lately type thing. Yes. And our role in changing the face of the earth through agriculture, I think, has been more dramatic than almost any of the cataclysmic events that we can imagine or that we know to have occurred on the earth. So, especially if you consider the time frame in which it happened, a very short time frame. So I identified what I called the history of the failure of prophecy. There have been all sorts of people prophesying about this. The failure of organizations, that is, we've had the Soil Conservation Service in effect for over 50 years, and I hate to think what it'd be without the Soil Conservation Service, but nevertheless it has failed to stem the tide of soil loss. And Wellington Brink said of the Soil Conservation Service that never in modern government has an organization been put together with more esprit de corps, more people from secretaries to the Ph.D.s in soil science, with the devoted to the common task of saving soils.
Then the Soil Conservation Society.
And the Soil Conservation Society established, and then the organization Friends of the Land established to help the Soil Conservation Service.
You mentioned, excuse me, you mentioned a person, Wellington
Brink.
Brink.
Right. And yes, Wellington Brink wrote this kind of a history of Big Hughes and his science, I believe it was called. So you've got not only the failure of prophecy, of history and prophecy, the failure of organizations. Then I saw, even on Amish and Mennonite farms, soil erosion beyond the replacement levels. So these are the people that count themselves as the highest calling is to be stewards of the land. And so there are three big failures, and finally the failure of success. That is, you get your yield up to 100 bushels per acre in corn over 70 million acres. We must be doing something right. Of course, what we haven't acknowledged is it's been dependent upon the extractive economy. That is, using 600 million year old fossil fuel energy subsidies to give the standing crop that supported our way of life, and so on. Meanwhile, the soils of western Iowa are eroding at 18 tons per acre per year. Meanwhile, atrazine is accumulating in the groundwaters, and on and on. So looking at those four great failures, it seemed to me that it was worthwhile to think in terms of what nature has done. And what would nature require of us is the question I put in that 1978 paper. And so that then forces you to think, well, what was here? You know, and so out my window at the Land Institute I could see wheat field that's dependent upon fossil fuel, dependent upon chemicals that human tissues have no evolutionary experience with. I could see soil eroding on the sloping ground, and